Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Hello and welcome to Movies vs. Capitalism, an anti-capitalist movie podcast. I'm Rivka.
And I'm Frank. And apologies to our listeners right off the top. We are going to be talking about Hillary Clinton today. We didn't want to. We never wanted to, but she did appear on the late night show. Or late night? Or the Tonight Show. God, who cares? So yeah, we knew we had to talk about it today.
Yeah, do you have what she said? Should we just read it out, what she said?
So if you haven't been on the internet at all in the last few days, Hillary Clinton was on the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. Fallon was asking her about the 2024 presidential election and, you know, the fact that voters don't seem to be too excited about these candidates that we have to vote for. And this was Hillary's response.
It's Biden versus Trump.
Yes,
we know that.
It is.
What do you say to voters who are upset that those are the two choices?
Get over yourself. Those are the two choices.
Yeah, love that.
Right? And
good.
You know, it's kind of like one is old and effective and compassionate, has a heart, and really cares about people, and one is old and has been charged with 91 felonies. I don't understand why this is even a hard choice, really. I don't understand it.
Get over yourselves. Those are the two choices. And then Fallon responded, yeah, I love that.
Yeah, really cool to see that she has learned her lesson from 2016. People really love being told, fucking deal with it, suck it up, you fucking baby, and vote for me. I was really dumbfounded. She's someone who every time she shows up, I'm like, surely she can't say something even worse this time around, but she always finds a way to do it.
The arrogance is remarkable and so fucking dangerous. Even MSNBC has an opinion piece that was like, Hillary Clinton just gave us a lesson on how not to talk about the 2024 election. I mean, even if you're like, Hill's my girl, certainly you've got to, like, at this point, and I feel like this is the question now, right? Is like, what is your fucking game plan? It's like this extreme error, because if you truly believe that not voting for Joe Biden is ushering in the end of democracy and a next level fascism, and that's your point of view, why aren't you furious at the Democratic Party right now? Why aren't you furious? Because clearly they don't give a fuck. This is not a group of people talking like this who give a fuck. Or, I don't know, I vacillate between being like, they're just so fucking out to lunch, so arrogant, but I feel like that doesn't fly. I feel like you saw how this went in 2016, and like, same playbook, just maybe even worse, like maybe even more I don't give a fuck. Or it's like January 6th showed them this guy, they gotta see how stupid he is now. I just don't even, but I think it's unfortunately more like it's an ego thing more than it is an actual material. Their world is not shifting dramatically if Trump becomes president, just like his fucking world didn't shift dramatically when Biden became president.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things happening here. One, I think it definitely is part of this tendency for Democratic politicians to have that kind of like, we actually know what's best for you. And if you don't realize what's better or what's best for you, you're too fucking stupid to figure it out for yourself. And that level of like condescending, like you're saying, arrogance, know-it-allism, the idea that like, you're all so ungrateful. You don't even realize how good you have it with the Democratic Party. And it's like, that's your fucking fault for not paying attention, for being on your phones too much, for blah, 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 for whatever bullshit. So there's that aspect of it. But then more so, the thing that really stuck out to me about these comments about get over yourself was just like pure reinforcement of the status quo. Nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to change. Oh, you want actual democracy? You wanted to vote in a Democratic primary? You wanted a candidate that's not supporting genocide? You wanted a candidate that's not Donald Trump? You wanted to vote for Bernie Sanders? You wanted to vote for Green Party? You wanted to have some other avenue to voice your opinion, to exercise democracy, to feel like you have a say over your own life and your country and how things are happening. Guess what? You don't fucking get that. You're getting status quo. You're getting these two fucking choices. This is it. This is how it works. It's never going to change. So fucking get over yourself and resign yourself to the fact that you got these two parties that are both controlled by corporations, and that is never gonna change. That's what I felt like she was really saying. And then especially amidst everything that's happening in Gaza, like the audacity.
The fucking audacity.
The audacity for any fucking person to say to anyone, you have to vote for Joe Biden for X, Y, or Z reason. No.
Mm-hmm.
The insanity of this system and the insanity of like American imperialism, all of this has gotten people so twisted that people have done mental gymnastics to the point of getting themselves to, yeah, Trump's really bad, but like the genocide guy isn't as bad. It's absurd that we're being put in this position. And any person, and I'll say this to anyone I'm talking to, any single person that's like, yo, obviously Trump is a stupid fascist and is dangerous, and I would never, ever vote for him. But I do not have, in good conscience, I cannot vote for Joe Biden. I'm not voting for Joe Biden. I'm in New York, so it doesn't matter as much, but like, I'm not voting for that man. And if anyone's like, I cannot in good conscience vote for Joe Biden, I completely understand where you're coming from. And they are just, the Democratic Party, they're just ignoring that. They're just completely ignoring all of that diffuse energy. And it, like you said, they keep running the same playbook and being like, maybe these radical progressives will cool it or like see reason. And if they don't, you know, we can just blame them at the end for losing anyway, because it's definitely not our fault. It's not our fault for fielding the shitty candidate. It's everyone else's fault for not realizing that the shitty candidate was actually not as shitty as you think.
It's not even see reason. That would be more tolerable if you believed that there was, I don't even think she doesn't even think she has to have fucking reason. Like, that's the thing. When you say get over it, there's no reason behind that. That's just like, I'm not listening to you. You're being shut down.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you see opinion pieces, at least in like, even in mainstream media, that's like, okay, that's probably not how to do it, because there is like, well, clearly that's, and I think to your point as well, like, I've tried to say that to anyone who has, because I get that deep, deep, deep fear of Trump. I have a deep, deep, deep fear of Trump and a Trump America.
Absolutely.
As the same, I have a deep, deep fear of like a continued America under this current Democratic administration, and honestly under anything that they have to offer thus far. I don't even know when I start to think about the bigger that far into the future, but I'm interested in how we take care of each other as we move forward, having conversations, I guess, specifically with loved ones and everyone who's in so much fear. Like, when you have two parties that create so much fear, everyone's afraid because we aren't given an option. We're all already, we talk about a loss of democracy. I'm like, hello, is this democracy? I'm so confused, you know? What?
Yeah.
And I know we have a lot of privileges, but I don't know if this is not what we were told to expect. So I'm like curious about how do we hold language to just be able to be like, I hear you're afraid, and like put that shared fear forward, as opposed to, if you do this, you're going to make it really bad. You're so stupid. And I've gotten that. I got a fucking asshole on my fucking, I mean, I get a bunch of assholes saying shit, but like this one just pissed me off because I just posted about voting. I voted, as I'm sure you did, no ballot for the New York primary, because that was our way of doing a protest vote. And I posted about that, and some fucking asshole's like, you fucking idiot. How stupid are you? Trump is gonna win. Have a nice life, you fucking idiot. You're so stupid. This is like a grown-ass adult who I knew in a professional capacity.
Oh, Jesus.
Who had been
my God.
plenty... shocked. Like, and you know what? My attitude towards that shit is like, okay, I'm gonna reply graciously and take a picture of the receipt. And I went on a tangent, but I guess my point is just like, that's what's coming up and I'm sure, I know a lot of people are feeling that, the bracing for what it means emotionally and physically and for our health. I guess what this is bringing up is like, it's a question of language. Like, how do we change minds and hearts, or open up minds and hearts?
For me, a thing that is helpful, because I think your point about language is so important. For me, what's helpful is I personally try to find rhetorical ways to pick apart the conditioning that we've all lived under for so long, especially when it comes to like electoral politics, especially with like the presidential election every 4 years. Because, you know, like something that we're often told, especially like, let's say 2016 was, you know, Democrats saying, oh, well, Trump won and Hillary lost because of the Bernie bros, or because of Jill Stein, or because of Susan Sarandon, or because of all the people who didn't vote for Hillary, the people who stayed home, or the people who whatever. It's all these people's fault. That's why she didn't win. And just turning that around for a second, thinking about it critically and re-articulating it in a way that's like, well, maybe she didn't win because she didn't offer people enough things to vote for. Maybe she didn't win because she was the poor candidate. Maybe she didn't excite people. Maybe she didn't get people to the ballot box. Maybe this has to do with the candidate that was running rather than the voters. I expressed this exact sentiment to someone in my family recently, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I guess I never thought about that." It's like, yeah, because we're fed this like rhetorical conditioning about how we are the ones to blame, when it's actually that they're the ones to blame. They're the ones that are fucking running for president. Also, when we have lived in this short-term history of Obama's first campaign and like Bernie's 2 campaigns, like we know what it looks like when a candidate gets people excited. We know what it looks like when a candidate offers a vision for the future, things that will materially benefit people's lives. Like I lived through that. So you can't turn around and then say like, well, actually the reason Hillary lost was because of the voters, not because of Hillary. Mm-hmm. So I think just the more that we can critically engage with like these rhetorical conditionings that we're all just hammered with, I don't know, the more we can like break this spell.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I hope we continue to have conversations about this. And maybe it's something we can invite our guests to consider, and we can have some more conversations about as we move into what will no doubt be a heated time, but also maybe a really exciting, there's potential there too. I do believe there's potential there too. And I do believe that it's a chance for growth and for deep discussion. So we shall see.
Look, we know as Marxists, you know, in times of great crises, those are times that are ripe for radicalization and for people to actually start seeing the system for what it is.
That's it. And you know what? We're recording this on the day of an eclipse, which if you want to know Frank's real feelings about, you should join our Patreon, because we go in deep on the capitalist meanings of the eclipse. But you have to be a subscriber to our Patreon. Actually, now that I bring it up, I'm going to use that to transition. Our Patreon. We want to remind our audience that we don't sell ads on this show. We rely completely on community support to keep the show going. So if you would like to, and if you're able to support us, you can do that by subscribing to our Patreon.
For just $5 a month, you get access to our new bonus episodes, our back catalog of bonus episodes, and you'll be supporting the show. And you can find our Patreon link in the episode description in your podcast player or by going to mvcpod.com. Also, please make sure to rate, review, like, and subscribe this podcast on your player so that you don't miss new episodes and so that other people can find the show.
All right, we're going to take a break, but we'll be right back with our episode of Who Framed Roger Rabbit with our guest, Rebecca Burns. Hey, everyone. We know that the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is at the forefront of everyone's minds right now. So we wanted to take a moment and share some resources with our listeners on how you can help.
You can go to ceasefiretoday.com, which has a list of resources for actions to demand a ceasefire from our Congress people. You can send them mass emails, you can sign a petition, you can find a protest, you can phone bank. They have a call script that will allow you to easily call all of your Congress people. Again, that is ceasefiretoday.com.
And remember, the only way forward is addressing the root causes of violence, Israeli military occupation, and apartheid, and ending U.S. complicity in this oppression.
I know it feels like this crisis is really insurmountable right now, but the more we call our Congress people, the more we show up at marches, the more we do anything and everything will help. So keep at it. If we all do this together, we can actually move the needle. Love you all, solidarity, and stay safe. Today, we are joined by Rebecca Burns. Rebecca is an investigative reporter covering housing and finance. She's based in Chicago by way of Indiana, but has never seen the movie Hoosiers. Rebecca, welcome to Movies versus Capitalism.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I've actually also never seen Hoosiers. Riv, have you seen Hoosiers?
Absolutely not.
It's a football movie, right? Is that correct?
I believe I do know by way of osmosis that it is about basketball, I think.
Oh.
But I feel, I'm going to say I don't think it'd be a good fit for your podcast based on what I've heard about it.
Without having seen it, okay, but just steer clear.
Now I'm curious.
And so Rebecca and I met each other when we were both working at The Lever. Rebecca, as I mentioned, is an investigative reporter, a very, very good investigative reporter. Rebecca, I don't know if I've ever gotten the chance to tell you that any story I've ever written by you, I found to be like so accessible, so easy to understand, so thorough, but like in a really, I don't know, in like not a condescending or wonky kind of way. I know you had a story published recently. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you so much, Frank. First of all, that's such a nice and thoughtful compliment. So yeah, I just had a big investigation come out about sort of right-wing astroturf attacks on wind and solar power. And I think I might have talked to you a little bit about this, Frank, because you are from New Jersey is a thing that I know.
Right,
and when I
am,
last
yes.
saw you, it was in New York. And I was heading to Long Island, but also
That's right.
following
yeah.
some trends in New Jersey, where basically longtime climate deniers have sort of convinced residents that offshore wind, which has not yet been built, is at fault for the death of whales. So you have, Tucker Carlson going on sort of a Save the Whales campaign. So the story that I wrote was sort of looking at this very weird but also frighteningly effective AstroTurf campaign, sort of disinformation campaign, where same Koch-funded organizations that spent decades denying the climate crisis have kind of shifted to discrediting climate solutions. Convincing communities that are sort of slated to get wind and solar power that, everything from this will kill whales, this will give them cancer. You may have heard some of these claims from Trump, but yeah, there's a pretty thoroughgoing and, like I said, sort of troublingly effective set of tactics that is, becoming a pretty major obstacle to meeting state and federal climate goals. So yeah, I was sort of deep in the Facebook trenches, learning about this.
Wow.
Wow, just like embedding yourself in the Jersey Shore, like conservative communities, which
Right.
I can attest to.
I should have asked you for some
vibrant.
tips. Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta just
Going
tell you, like,
undercover.
I'm like, just don't talk to this guy John at this bar that I know of. He's gonna give you a really hard time. Speaking of investigations, we're here today to talk about, I think one of the best film noirs, in my opinion. I know it's like also a comedy, but this is one of my favorite movies of all time. I'm so glad you chose it. You chose the film Who Framed Roger Rabbit? With no question mark, I learned on this watch. Could have sworn it was a question. It's not. It's just the phrase.
It's not. Well, we'll get into it, but I heard that that's because it's superstitious for filmmakers to put any kind of question mark.
Punctuation?
Well, particularly question mark in a title.
Interesting.
Because the novel, which it was loosely based off of, does in fact have a question mark in the title.
Got it.
Right.
But let's get into it. So this film is directed by Robert Zemeckis, written by Jeffrey Price and Peter S. Seaman, loosely based on the book Who Censored Roger Rabbit? By Gary K. Wolfe, starring Bob Hoskins, Christopher Lloyd, Stubby Kaye, Joanna Cassidy, and the voices of Charles Fleischer and an uncredited Kathleen Turner. This film was made for around $50.6 million and had a box office of $351.5 million. So
Big
I
old
would
hit.
say quite a success.
Yeah.
And it's set in a 1947 Hollywood where cartoon characters known as toons and humans coexist. The film follows Eddie Valiant, a private investigator who must clear the name of Roger Rabbit, a toon framed for murder. As Eddie delves deeper, he discovers a plot to destroy Toontown, led by the villainous Judge Doom. Overcoming his past grudges with the Toons, Eddie fights to uncover the truth and save Toontown.
And a little bit of historical context for when this film was released. It was released in June 1988. Another movie we've covered from this year is Working Girl, another MVC classic. What's going on in America? This is Ronald Reagan's last year in office, and in November, George H.W. Bush is elected as his successor. The very first Walmart supercenter opened in Washington, Missouri. Rush Limbaugh began his conservative talk radio show. The average price for a gallon of gas is $1.08. Big screen television costs about $3,000, and 98% of U.S. households had at least one television set. So yeah, very end of the Reagan era.
Strange year, but you know what? Something else good happened.
You and me.
I was born.
Uh-huh.
And you were born.
The two of us. Yep, that's correct. Year of the Dragon.
We said not Rush having his own TV show. We'll have to do something about this.
The world needs us.
Balance it out.
Yeah, I immaculate conceptioned myself. I don't know if you knew that. So, Rebecca, the first thing we start the conversation with, we ask our guest, why did you choose this movie to talk about on this podcast?
Yeah, so this was, per my parents, the first movie that I ever saw in theaters. I am a 1986er, so I was about 4 years old. And it's kind of become a piece of family lore that every once in a while my parents are like, oh, this is why you turned out the way you did. Like, Roger, this movie about corruption and capitalism. And then also the sort of more sentimental reason, when you emailed me about coming on this podcast, I was getting ready to go see my folks. So I was like, you know what, this will be a fun little convergence. We will watch it together again, and then I'll come talk about it. So that's what we did last week. I watched it with my parents.
I love that. I love the idea that the kids who went to go see this as actual children were totally radicalized and pursued careers based on it.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that happened in my generational cohort is that we graduated college straight into the financial crisis. So it could have been that as well. But I think Roger Rabbit may have something to do about it.
Yeah, one or the other.
When Julia Rock, our other former colleague and other reporter, was on this program, she picked the movie Chinatown. So I think there's got to be something in the DNA of,
Yes.
reporters, investigators, being attracted to stories like this.
Yes, absolutely.
What was your reaction watching it now, today, and with your family? Did you and your parents have any sort of new takes or new reactions on this go around?
Yeah, so, I can't remember. Like many people, I had been sort of vaguely aware of this semi-apocryphal story about the LA streetcar system, and that is something that I think my dad has always talked about. So yeah, we got into a little more what the actual history was, and then just also, watching this as a kid. There are so many just very funny one-liners, references that went totally over my head. And then B, just what an absolute technical marvel this movie was, that you have
Truly.
Cartoon characters casting shadows, interacting. So yeah, I think both of those things, really, really stood out this time.
Rivka, what about you? What was were you a Roger Rabbit kid? Because I similarly, my mom at some point, I don't know why, doesn't seem like a movie my mom would particularly like, but she was like, you're going to watch this all the time from age 2 to 10. So this was a regular feature in my household. But Rivka, was this a kid's movie for you?
Not at all. My parents were busy showing me either really tense documentaries, or it just wasn't. Yeah, for some reason, my mom notoriously is not into cartoons, so I think we missed this in her household. And I'm not sure if my dad ever showed it to me, but I do remember the characters from it, like Jessica Rabbit. And the thing I remember most and carried most as a child was just being confused and intrigued by the fact that a human adult male would be attracted to a cartoon. And I kind of got that was what I remembered about this film before watching it as an adult.
Yeah, it's a very horny kids movie, or it's a very, or it's a very kids friendly adult noir movie. It really does straddle that line.
Yeah, that's my question. Was it marketed as a kids movie? Because I watched this assuming this was not a kids movie, but now I'm curious.
From my research, I believe they really wanted to be a 4-quadrant film, meaning every demographic, men, women, boys, girls, everyone's gonna love this movie. I think marketing wise they pushed it as something fun for the whole family, but also something that teenagers could go see and enjoy. This is that time the 80s when kids movies did have much more adult humor and cursing and stuff like that. But I mean, I know briefly about the production because I find this fascinating, and we'll talk about the content of the movie at some point, but this movie has so many different layers going on with it in what it's saying and also how it was produced. This movie was produced when Disney was basically not about to go bankrupt, but Disney, the studio, the animation studio, was doing very, very, very badly. They had not had a hit in like years. They did not, like, their animation house was not nearly as robust as it had been. Everyone was kind of like, is Disney like kind of cooked? Like, are they done? Are they just the theme parks now? So this story came along at a time when Disney was like really trying to rejuice their image, and Steven Spielberg was a producer on this movie and basically convinced Disney and Warner Brothers to give all of their characters to use together. It was the first time that Disney and Warner Brothers characters appeared on screen together, so it was like a joint production. There's a lot of like tedium in the contracts of like literally like Bugs and Mickey have to be on screen for the exact same amount of time. They have to have the exact same amount of lines. Same for Daffy and Donald. Like really like inane bullshit. But this movie was a huge hit, and then a few years later, The Little Mermaid comes out, and Disney is back. So this movie was produced at a time. If this movie had been produced like a few years later, Disney would have been like, "Fuck off! You're not getting our characters." But this like it just so happened to be made right at the specific time that all of these corporate interests actually like let their guards down and let, you know, Spielberg and Zemeckis just like have fun with their characters, which you would imagine would be like unheard of today without so many people just needing to make so much money off of it.
It's inspiring, really. All of these corporations, you know, coming together for a common cause.
Yeah. See, corporations can have solidarity too.
Yeah. Corporations can give us, you know, art and joy and everything. And
That's so interesting because I was reading about the desire for like if there would ever be sequels, and apparently there've been a lot of scripts and a lot of potentials for that, but one of the reasons they said it hasn't happened is Disney's doesn't need to. It's not really on brand for them anymore. It kind of feels like in the story that you just told, Frank, it's like that ex that like puts in all the work and makes you and gets you back on your feet, and now you're too good for them.
Yeah, it's exactly what it was. Yeah, I read like one of the proposed sequels was called Toon Platoon, and it was supposed to be the Toons fighting in World War I believe.
Wow.
Which
I don't know if I would watch that, honestly. That could go wrong in a lot of ways. Yeah.
So we were talking a little about the making of and how this film starts, and I guess that's where my head was as I was watching this. You should know I had just watched the 4-part series Quiet on Set about the Nickelodeon abuses that really all the horrific stuff, but it was really fascinating to then go and watch this and just like how much this film is about the exploitation of actors, particularly innocent actors. Not that children are cartoons, but like they are more innocent. That just stood out to me so much, how they really get that abusive director and the abusive system of Hollywood. So right, you know, he's a toon. You could drop anything you want on his head. He'll shake it off, you know, and it kind of made me just think about this is how child actors are so often treated. Actors in general, but especially child actors are treated in this industry of they're kids, and they're more susceptible to just the worst parts of this industry where they really feel like this is how it's supposed to be, right? This is the industry. I guess this is what I have to do to succeed. They're just a lot more susceptible to the system. And so that's where my head was at when I was watching this movie.
Yeah, there was that great one-liner where, you know, he's like, oh, we have Dumbo on rent, and the best thing is they work for peanuts, and like throws some peanuts at it.
Yep. The movie really nails the Toons, or I think like specifically intentionally is using the Toons as a metaphor for, either like child actors, or I almost took it sort of like a second-class citizen kind of situation. Like the Toons are loosely allegorical, standing in for like non-white people in Los Angeles, especially at that time. You know, when we meet Judge Doom, one of the first things he does is just capital punishment. He murders a Toon in cold blood, and just like seemingly he has the authority to just murder Toons without any sort of like trial or anything. So yeah, really a really terrifying world for these Toons to live in, where just like someone can just come in and throw them in the dip without, like, that little shoe didn't do anything wrong. That little pink
that
shoe.
Little sneaker. That's a terrifying scene. That also, I rewatched this and was like, oh yeah, I've had years of nightmares about this. Now I remember where it's from.
It's horrifying.
That's why it's shocking that it's like to think about it as like, what'd you say, a quadrant movie, but really to bring kids to this. I'm glad I didn't see it. This is the kind of movie that if I saw as a kid, it would have really fucked me up. because of exactly what you're saying, that it's so real. Like, there's so much darkness. It's such a dark movie. I'm kind of surprised that it was like marketed for kids. Well, not surprised knowing our culture, but it's really intense.
Yeah, there's a lot of murders
And violent.
People get shot on screen. Eddie Valiant is dealing with the trauma of his brother being murdered by a tune. We find out like that's his like origin story, and he's like now just like a functioning alcoholic. Yeah, very very serious adult themes for a kids movie. And like you're saying, Rebecca, ones that like I completely missed when I was a kid. Like I remember being a kid and being like, wow, Roger Rabbit is very very funny. And then it wasn't until like watching this in college. I remember the first time watching this as an adult and realizing all of the allegorical stuff in here, you know, specifically. We'll talk a little bit more about like the LA streetcar system, but really being like, damn, they packed a lot into what is on its surface a kid's movie.
Right. And I mean, Judge Dooms, we can talk more about his plot, but one element of it is to mass murder all of the tunes. Like that is, you know, he has like the canon of dip. And you can sort of almost miss that. But yeah, his plan is to literally like flatten Toontown by massacring all of its existing residents. So yeah, not a light movie by any means.
Should we get into sort of the who framed Roger Rabbit, why, and then this allegory?
Yeah, absolutely. So the main mystery plot, as we learn at the end, is that Judge Doom has been acquiring all this real estate or is trying to acquire all this real estate in Los Angeles, has acquired the red car, which is the LA streetcar system, and his evil plan is to, as Rebecca said, just absolutely eradicate every tune in Toontown and all of Toontown, and once this freeway is built, basically have like the prime real estate next to this freeway that the LA city is about to start construction on. So Rebecca, you mentioned you had done some digging into this about the General Motors conspiracy, right?
Yeah. So, you know, I am not a cultural critic by any means. I'm not even really a movie buff. So to earn my keep, I did, you know, about an hour worth of Googling this morning. And my comprehensive research has revealed. So, yeah, I mean, in the movie, there's this sort of great, do we do spoilers on
Yes.
on this pod? Okay. The great reveal at the end is this, you know, cartoon villain played by Christopher Lloyd, who sort of is like the amalgamation of evil corporations, you know, reveals that his big plot is to acquire Toontown so he can build a freeway through it. And I really love that moment, especially because, you know, I know I've written a lot of stories where we sort of describe corruption as cartoonish, and this is sort of like the perfect distillation of that, where Eddie Valiant says something like, you know, a freeway, that's your whole plan, and he's like, no, you're thinking too small. There's going to be a freeway, there's going to be wonderful billboards, there are going to be gas stations, you know. And it's just such a pedestrian or anti-pedestrian vision that he's trying to carry
It's also
out.
such a banal evil dream.
Exactly.
It's just like yes, and gas stations and mid-tier restaurants. It's so mid.
Well, and I think what I caught about that as well was Valiant actually says like he's like, what the hell's a freeway? So in this moment, they just couldn't even picture this. That we now, when I lived in LA, that was actually my experience first coming there. It was like, what the fuck is this? This is so strange to me. And I was so upset just by the freeway culture and the billboards and everything he describes. And then after a period of time, you just get so used to it and it becomes just nothing you question. So the fact that it was asked like, what the hell's a freeway, reminded me of what it was like to not know what a freeway was.
Yeah.
And that at the beginning of the movie when he like bums a ride off of the red car, and one of the kids that he's riding with is like, hey mister, ain't you got a car? And he's like, who needs a car in Los Angeles? We got the best public transportation system in the world. And at the time, that was true.
And then he bums a smoke off those children.
That's right. Dude, fuck it. Eddie Valiant fucking
But
rules.
this was a kid's movie.
Coolest hang. Cool, very kids movie. Sorry, Rebecca. We got to cut you off mid expose.
Yeah, right. Yeah, here we go. Let's get into the real stuff. So part of what I learned this from included a 60 Minutes segment called Clang, 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 Went the Trolley, with went underlined in like ominous thick lines in from I think the year before Who Framed Roger Rabbit comes out. So there are kind of layers to this, and as you know, many such stories goes, it's sort of not as simple as the movie depicts. So here we go. First of all, there was an actual criminal conspiracy case against a cabal of corporations, including General Electric, for a scheme to they created a holding company that did actually what was convicted of trying to create a transportation monopoly to sell buses to public transportation systems. What complicates this a little is in Los Angeles, the streetcar system itself was the creation of Henry Huntington, I believe his name, whose name is sort of all over Los Angeles. And while it was at one point sort of a highly effective transportation system, it sort of was an invention of this real estate capitalist that was supposed to be sort of a way to help him sell the land that he had acquired. So I've only been to LA once, so tell me if this, I think you're both former Angelanos. LA at the time where Huntington, who is the nephew of railroad magnate and sort of, instead of inheriting the company, got millions of dollars to kind of do whatever he wished, decided that he was going to sort of buy up some land in the desert. This is like sort of turn of the century, late 1800s. And because, LA is in a giant desert, it's not super easy to convince people to move there. He creates this system of electric streetcars kind of as a loss leader. So it basically, in order to convince people to buy these parcels of land, he kind of creates little subdivisions connected by streetcars. And that actually kind of, from what I understand, if there's anyone out there, who knows this history better and I'm bugling it, I apologize. But that kind of bakes in the, urban sprawl nightmare that we know
Sure.
Los Angeles for today. And then, by the 30s, 40s, he's not actually making money off of the electric streetcar system. He's using it to sell and profit off real estate and create sort of these little balkanized neighborhoods. So by the time that most of the land has been sold, there's not really any reason to continue maintaining the streetcars. So from what I understand, they were actually already in pretty bad shape, starting in the 30s, 40s. So, this is sort of an interesting case where it's like, is it a conspiracy or is it just capitalism? We didn't actually ever have a mass public transportation system in Los Angeles or elsewhere in the country. We had sort of, this sort of little loss leader that was in service of a real estate capitalist. But, of course, it was still, for people who relied on it, vastly preferable to what exists now.
Sure. Which is just it's almost impossible to get around in LA without your own car. And it sucks. And only in the last few years have they tried to reinvest in like the metro system. I also had read a little bit about, Rebecca, maybe you saw this, about National City Lines, which was sort of like was that the consortium holding company that you had mentioned earlier?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they had been in Los Angeles and in other cities around the country at that time, were just like essentially buying up public transportation companies in cities around the country, and just for the sake of dismantling them or converting them all to motor buses. And this was like a combo of like GM, Firestone Tire, Standard Oil. So all of the automobile and oil and tire interests, through all of the mid 20th century, were just like, what if we kept everyone from having public transportation? And you know what? They did it. Congrats, guys. Well, thank you for that, because I think it's such an important part. It's what the mystery of this movie is about. And I don't think a lot of people know that it's based on, like a loosely true story.
I love that you said, is this conspiracy or capitalism? Because that was something I had on my mind watching it as well. It feels so much like this movie's about just that. Often it probably is capitalism, but also capitalism is just these capitalists conspiring together, and the role of conspiracy and the function of conspiracy to aid capitalism. So creating this whole idea that literally the framing of Roger Rabbit could like creating sort of like this story that he's this jealous toon, and how people are pulled into playing their parts in those roles and those conspiracies. It's just something that I feel like we're seeing happening at cartoonish levels all the time. And I have to always, because I'm a sucker for a conspiracy theory, but we talked about this the other day, like have to be consistently reminded, like if you're sniffing out a conspiracy, it's probably capitalism. And there's probably like a just follow the money if you want the answer kind of situation. I was thinking about the roles everyone plays in this, and I was so fascinated by Jessica Rabbit this watch. And I was just thinking about the role of the female body in conspiracy, and like the role of the female body and sexualization in the femme fatale to like distract. Now we have our Kate Middleton and like the conspiracy of like, where did she go? The literal disappearance of the woman, or the woman as the insane woman, or this over-sexualized woman, and Jessica Rabbit's character being this femme fatale trope, this man-eating vamp who has just this supposedly trail of bodies, but they subvert it, and she is really like, in some ways, like heroic. She loves Roger Rabbit. She does what she has to do. She's being held hostage by this system. Like, she's part of R.K. Maroon's plot. He says at the top, he's like, look, Valiant, his wife's poisoned, but he thinks she's Betty Crocker. You know, and this role of women constantly being cast in those roles. And that I love that the film gives her the agency to recognize that and use it and become a hero while everyone else is calling her, you know, this painted hussy. I love her line where she says, where was it? When she's like, I'm not bad, I'm just drawn that way.
Totally. That's an iconic
What a great
line.
It's iconic.
All-timer.
It's
Absolute
all-timer. But it's really deep.
Yeah. No, I love that you laid all that out, because I was pleasantly surprised on this rewatch how much agency Jessica has in the movie. And you're right, it is doing all of like the femme fatale, overly sexualized like tropes and everything, but she's driving a lot of the plot. She's actually taking matters into her own hands to keep Roger, either save him or like keep him out of danger. But I was pleasantly surprised that they did subvert it and they gave Jessica more agency. I just really love the bit that every toon woman in this universe is like, oh my God, Roger Rabbit, Jesus Christ, what a hottie. And like, there's like some innuendo or like some euphemism for like, yeah, Roger like fucks so well. Like we're getting all of these shades. I think she's something like he's better lover than a fighter. But yeah, I loved the Jessica and Roger relationship on this rewatch.
Right. I think she stuffs him in a trunk at one point to save him because she's like, he's just gonna mess this up. So let me step in here.
Yeah, knows her partner's limitations, you know, is supportive.
Well, and it's important because it's so small, but if you don't catch it, it's like the material reality that she lays out, that she's like, no, I had to do the patty cake and pose for the pictures because they were threatening his contract. They were threatening our livelihood, which is like how this whole thing works. And again, goes back to like the basic 101 capitalism of it all. Is like when you're contracted, when you're working in these systems, it doesn't matter how seemingly Roger Rabbit is the biggest star. It doesn't matter. His material reality is defined by these studios, and they could take it all away. Just like, you know, again, any of these child actors in this documentary or anyone that you see, it's so easy to think, well, why don't they have more agency? And you're like, the system is not set up that way. Even the tunes, it's interesting when they do talk about money in this. They offer him like $100, which I know is a lot in 1947, but they never mention how much the tunes are getting paid. But I'm guessing they're getting paid. They're on contract. I'd be curious more about like their monetary reality.
That was my mom when we watched this movie together last week. At the end, there was like a long pause, and then she was like, "So when Eddie Valiant works in Toontown, what does he get paid in?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know."
It's a the toon logic is like, I love how everyone has to like abide by toon logic, but also it's like, so when he breaks out the toon bullets, is like, so these bullets can kill a toon? I thought we couldn't kill a toon, but like cartoon bullets can?
Right.
Okay.
They kind of wink at that. Yeah.
There's one other thing I wanted to bring up in terms of like the allegory of the toons as second class citizens. And there's another fairly famous story from LA's sordid history about the Chavez Ravine. This kind of is like Doom's whole plot to eradicate all of Toontown, I think maybe like loosely based on this. So
The Chavez Ravine was a neighborhood on the east side of Los Angeles, predominantly Mexican-American, families that had lived there for generations. One of the first places where Mexican-American folks were building generational wealth in California. And so in the 30s, through one of the New Deal programs, LA was going to reinvest in some public housing. And they chose the Chavez Ravine. They were like, that's the best place to push everybody out and build a bunch of public housing. The neighborhood was deemed blighted. We can extrapolate from that what we will. And then over the course of the 30s and 40s, through eminent domain, LA started pushing out all of these families. Some of them were not compensated even nearly as much as what their properties were worth at that time. And then by 1957, the city of LA decided rather than to build the public housing, they sold that land to the Brooklyn Dodgers baseball team. And then that is where Dodgers Stadium was built. And then obviously all of the residents of Chavez Ravine were like, this is fucking bullshit. And there was a lot of there were protests, there's a lot of pushback, but the city ultimately pushed everybody out. And rather than investing in affordable housing, they sold it to, again, large corporate interests. So another example of kind of I think what we're talking about, how it's not necessarily conspiracy. It's just kind of follow the money. It's right in front of you. Some people from the Brooklyn Dodgers probably lobbied the LA City Council and then they approved this sale. It's probably just as, I didn't dig that deep, but it's assuming as simple as that. But I just wanted to mention that story because I think, again, not a lot of people know about it. And I think Roger Rabbit is brilliant for loosely doing an allegory for it. So
yeah. I mean, I think in addition to sort of an allegory about the death of public transportation, where the exact details of the role that General Electric played are a little bit fuzzier, a little bit more complicated, but I think this really works as an allegory for what was called slum clearance in the 50s, and just sort of the related role of transportation and housing policies, and how that's kind of created, not to dump on LA again, but cities that we know like LA today. Because Toontown also sort of, I mean, you mentioned this, Frank, I think the Toons are sort of racialized, and the Toontown is sort of a ghettoized community. They sort of make reference to the detectives not going there. So yeah, I think it works on that level as well.
It is funny though, when you hear about Toontown throughout the entire movie, they're hinting at it like it's some sort of slum or ghetto or dangerous part of town, and then you get there and all of the trees and buildings are smiling and singing, and it's just this. It's just the happiest place on earth. I love the juxtaposition. I love all of the Toon logic in this movie, and especially when the human characters learn that they have to start behaving by Toon logic in order to get what they want done.
Well, if that's the allegory we're going with, then it actually works out that you're it's not the scary stereotyped place that everyone's saying, and that's often the case. Is if you go into a neighborhood and you get to know the people, it's nothing like the news or whatever the media has benefited from telling you it is, so that it can justify getting it out of the way and destroying it. It's also interesting thinking about the justification for all of these systems, like the freeways and progress. This is actually progress to have freeways because you won't have to stop in traffic, as opposed to public transportation or the way it was. It's just amazing how that works. And as soon as it's there, you couldn't even imagine another way. And so it's easy to say, well, it's unfortunate that people lived there, but progress has to progress. It's really deep and dark.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing about that Judge Doom speech that I thought was great, where he's there'll be billboards, there'll be fast food restaurants, is not unlike some of the actual posters that I have seen sort of promoting brand new suburbs. So in the that actually is sort of a vision that sounds ridiculous now because we're living it, but is not so unlike what was being sold in sort of an era of rapid suburbanization.
Yeah, and just the rampant commodification of that time. I saw a tweet recently that was man, American capitalists really really convinced everyone that freedom is being able to choose between 80 different types of shampoos and not being able to quit your job and not lose your health care. And I thought that really, you know what I mean? The way we kind of speaking to what you're saying, Riv, with progress, where it's well, of course we're gonna build all of these freeways and these fast food places and all of these. There's so many consumer choices. What an amazing free country you live in with all of these goodies that we're giving you. And it's Actually, I would have preferred the public transportation. That would have been, that's what I wanted.
And how illogical it is that it works, that there are these moments of lack of logic when you're like, in Toontown, they have a thing that you can slap against the wall and it's like a black hole you can go through. You're like, certainly you don't need freeways if you just work with like the technologies
Right.
of Toontown.
We have magic readily available. Actual magic.
And he does it too, right? When Roger Rabbit, for them, what's most important, which I love, is laughter, is joy. And they'll take the joke over anything, which works to, I guess, their detriment, but not, but that time when he's got the handcuff and he's like, well, actually, I could get my hand out the whole time. Never mind. It's like,
But only when it was funny.
but only when it's funny. They highlight that the lack of logic, and like that is sort of the key for Toontown to work. And this freeway thing is so fucking ridiculous when you think about it that way.
Well, it's almost like Roger's like pathological need to be funny is almost just like it's like his most pure toon instinct. It's like it's not clouded by anything. It almost feels like someone just being like, no, like I'm just going to do what feels good and what is right. I'm not actually being influenced by, the pressures of what society expects from me. I'm just like, nope, the whole point in life is just being funny.
Well, yeah, and that also the whole time, it's like that's what's so interesting about this mash of genres is they can never really get them to. They're scared at points, but then they'll always find the laugh. It's like they never abide by the logic of the human rule of this noir universe, which is really a fun, fast. I don't know another film that mashes genres like that well in a way that allows both of them to comment on the other. It's like the cartoon is commenting on the noir of it, and the noir of it like allows you to understand the role of cartoons. So I think that's probably also why it was so, I think it won 3 Academy Awards, and this was a hit of a movie. People loved this, rightfully so. It got great acclaim.
Yeah. In general, I love noir. I love detective stories, but they tend to be very copy, and they tend to take themselves very seriously. So this was also just a really fun movie that does something very different with that. A friend of mine who's a journalist, Sarah Lazar, a couple years ago put out a novel that she called Regulatory Noir. Like the hero was someone who worked at an electric utility. And I was like, yes, that is exactly what I want to read. And upon rewatching Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I was like, this is like a great example of regulatory noir. Like we have like the foreshadowing is like a shell company that you see sort of popping up around town. I think it's Cloverleaf Industries in the movie. And then sort of like we were talking about, sort of the seedy underbelly is just the very normal, predictable way that, public goods get commodified in a capitalist society.
All right, I want to talk about just like the movie itself for a little bit. I know we've been talking about the movie. We've been talking about like more like the political themes. I just have to take a second because this movie, and you said it at the beginning, Rebecca, this movie is a technical marvel. Really like shouldn't have worked. Like on paper, it's unbelievable that Zemeckis and the screenwriters were able to pull this off, just like between the screenplay itself and then all like cannot be overstated how technologically difficult this movie was. This is like the first time this sort of animation live action hybrid had really been tried on this scale. And Zemeckis was developing a lot of new technologies in order to like make this movie happen at all. And it's absolutely gorgeous, from like the opening cartoon, which is like such a great, like the actual cartoon with Baby Herman. And then like that transition into live action as the refrigerator opens. It's really like one of those movie magic things where watching it again, I was like, God damn, that is so cool. And I imagine like when people saw that for the first time, they were like, how the fuck did they just do that? That's unbelievable. And it's just, the whole movie still just hits. Bob Hoskins, I just want for a second. I love that man so much. On this rewatch, I wrote down the phrase, Bob Hoskins is a sexy little hairy meatball. I just absolutely love him. I think his performance is so good. Benny the Cab rules. The whole scene at the Ink and Paint Club, I love the duel between Donald and Daffy.
Is that the dueling pianos?
Yeah, the dueling piano scene.
Bob Hoskins had to stop acting for a year after because he, like you said, I think this was the first time, even for actors, that they're working with, like, I guess now everyone does green screen and is used to not acting with each other, but he committed so much to hallucinating his scene partners that he said it was so real. He was like hallucinating tunes all the time and needed a year to recover.
Jesus. Well, worth it. Great performance. Oh, I also learned that the studio originally wanted Harrison Ford for the Bob Hoskins role, but he turned it down. They went to a bunch of A-listers who were basically like, that sounds like so much fucking work. And like, I don't have the time or energy. And if it flops, it's going to be so embarrassing.
Yeah.
I heard, what's his name from Lost in Translation?
Oh, yeah, Bill Murray.
Yeah, I heard. Did you hear that? But Bill Murray, they were looking for Bill Murray, couldn't get in touch with Bill Murray. Bill Murray didn't know this until like years later, hearing it in an interview after, you know, Roger Rabbit was already a great, widely received film. And he was like, what? What?
I guess Bill Murray went on, wasn't he in Space Jam several years later, which does like the same thing, but, you know, arguably not as good a movie.
Not nearly.
I'm so happy this isn't Bill Murray. It would have ruined it for me.
Yeah, not Bill Murray. They also, I think, offered it to Chevy Chase, which would have sucked.
Oh, yeah.
I think Eddie Murphy was considered at one point, which I'm, interested in. But I think Bob Hoskins just does. He just plays such a perfect gruff East Coast guy, even though he's English and by way of Los Angeles. Yeah, didn't know that he was British until I was an adult. Blew my mind.
Until you just told me that. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the point in the episode where we will hand out awards for this film. Not that it needs any more, but we're going to give it some. And the first award that we will give is Best Politics. It goes to the character with the best politics in the movie.
I'm going to nominate Jessica Rabbit, I think.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Rivka, I feel like you hit on this, that she really just understands what's going on in this world like no one else does, like both the toon world and human world, and is sort of trying her best to be a moral actor given the choices that she has.
Yeah. I definitely think it's Jessica Rabbit. I feel like we should give her some competition. So I'm going to nominate that one dude in the bar who, when Judge Doom is like, does that horrible, and I had my headphones on, so it really got me, that horrifying chalkboard scratch. And he's like, no, he doesn't have a Western accent. I don't know why I'm doing that, but he's like,
Angelo.
I know is that Angelo? Is that the guy's name?
Yeah, Angelo. He's like, I see no rabbit. Yeah, that guy.
I actually did this just because I was like, Frank will do a great voiceover moment there. He's like, I seen a rabbit. It's the moment where they're like, who's going to sell out? And as we've already seen, if the detective's getting paid $100 for like taking those, doing all this, Judge Doom is like, I'll give someone is it 5,000 or 500? I think it's like 5. It's a lot of money he's offering up for this bunny rabbit. And you have like a whole group of people in this bar who desperately, clearly need this money. So I just thought it was a great moment of everybody deserves an award for not breaking, but he's just like a little extra fun because he's gonna fuck with Judge Doom. That takes some chutzpah.
Yeah, and because he was a prick earlier, so it's like it's a full
redemption arc. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, like a mini redemption arc. Yeah, Roger says a laugh can be a very powerful thing. Sometimes in life, laughter is the only weapon we have. Which is beautiful.
I see why everybody wants to date Roger Rabbit now that you said that line.
Spoken like the Casanova he is, yeah.
All right, our next award is Worst Politics, goes to the character with the worst politics in the movie. I have one for this, and I think like Judge Doom would be the easy choice, but I think like Judge Doom is not well, like he's a toon that is trying to kill all the other toons. Like he's got this absolutely absurd freeway plan. I'm gonna put him on his own thing. I think the Weasels have the worst politics because I think the Weasels are like active class traitors.
Yeah,
and they are assisting Judge. They're basically like the collaborators. They are assisting Judge Doom. They are totally fine in helping him carry out his capital punishment without any sort of trial. So yeah, I think the Weasels.
The toon collaborators, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, toon Gestapo collaborators, toon police collaborators.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like if you're going to throw the Weasels out there, like we got to throw, what's his face? RK R.K. Maroon. Yeah. Not so much Marvin Acme. Maybe comes later. Neither are great. Already not treating not treating the tunes well as is.
I mean, Marvin Acme does give all of Toontown to the tunes. I'm not
That's
saying
true.
he's
In a
perfect.
will written in invisible ink, right? So there's a flaw in his benevolent plan.
You know what?
Wow.
You know what? You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean,
I know. Look, I am humble enough to admit when I am wrong, and I'm wrong on that one. Marvin Acme. Marvin Acme sucks, it turns out.
No, but you're right. I think the Judge Doom is sort of like the, unhinged player in the game, but sort of the powers that be. We see like the studio and, the people from the beginning of the movie are sort of setting the rules of the game here.
I kind of just don't want Judge Doom to win. Just like now I've started to visualize maybe as Bob Hoskins does this whole world. And at the award show, I would like to see Judge Doom's face when he loses award because he would want to win Worst Politics.
Yeah, and it's the easy choice.
Yeah.
Give it to the weasels. And our last award is Best Supporting Character / Spinoff. So this goes to one of your favorite supporting characters and maybe a spinoff you would want to see them in.
Benny the Car, is that his name? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very entertaining scene. I love that he does like the fake out where he's like, my wheels got dipped, and then he actually keeps going and sort of saves the day. So yeah, I think I would watch Benny the Car.
Yeah. The chase sequence is so good. Like the amount of like humans interacting with you have Eddie Valiant, a human driving a toon car, and then you have the Weasels cartoons driving like a live action car. It's fucking unbelievable. And then at some point, Benny the car is driving another car. So yeah, I love Benny. Benny feels like Benny, Roger, Jessica, Baby Herman, they feel like classic cartoon characters. Like we should know, like they've been around forever, but they were actually like inventions for this movie. They just like have such like it just feels like they've been around forever. Also, Charles Fleischer, who voices Roger, also voices Benny, which I think is like a really amazing range of voice performance. So I'd also go with Benny.
I failed to research this. I don't know if either of you did, but why wasn't Kathleen Turner credited? Do we know?
I did a tiny bit of digging. I couldn't find the straight story. It was just like...
Oops.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I didn't realize that. Yeah, it's funny. I also rewatched Romancing the Stone recently. I don't know why, but yeah, she was having quite the couple of years there.
From what I can see, it just says that like she did it as a favor to Zemeckis.
Strange.
Yeah.
There's more. Maybe we'll come back to it. It's strange.
And it's obviously her, right? Because she was already pretty well known at the point, like has that like distinctive husky voice. So yeah, that's bizarre. I don't know why.
And I'm curious if like uncredited means not paid. Like what's the deal? It's so strange.
It's a good question. Yeah.
Also, we didn't put this in, I don't think, our historical context for this year, but this film's coming out right after there was a big labor strike for SAG-AFTRA and the writers.
Ooh. Okay.
So just thinking of that as naming this very strange hole in this story.
Did you have any other best supportings that you wanted to mention?
What is the name of the absolute wild tune who is like, I guess, Valiant's ex-lover? The crazy tune is like, do you know what I'm talking about? She's like, with the, like she's just meant to be, I think.
Oh,
like
when he goes to Toontown and he thinks he sees Jessica, but it's the other Toon woman, and that whole chase
who, like,
sequence.
Chases him. Yeah,
her obsessed. We'll just call it. We'll just call it the other Toon woman.
Sure, the other Toon woman.
I want to know all about the other Toon woman's life.
Sure.
Yeah. I'm still definitely also grieving the loss of that very, very cute little sneaker. However many years later.
Yeah.
R.I.P. Sneaker.
All right. Well, Rebecca, this was so much fun. Thank you for choosing this movie.
You.
Yeah, this is genuinely this is like maybe in my top 5, top 10 favorite movies of all time. So always glad to revisit. Before we wrap, the last thing we like to ask our guests is what they do. If you have something you do in your day-to-day life where you get the chance to practice your values, whether they be, progressive, leftist, anti-capitalist, just generally being a nice person. And that can be anything from an organization you work with to like a practice you engage in. So yeah, what is that?
Sure. Yeah, well, so I guess you're catching me on a pretty good week for this question. So we had the Illinois primary was on Tuesday. Don't worry, I'm not going to say I was volunteering for Joe Biden. So I live on the northwest side of Chicago, have for about 10 years now, and I've sort of been involved in a long-term project to build an alternative sort of to the Democratic machine in the city. So we started in around 2015 when we ran a local high school teacher for city council. In 2019, we elected a socialist named Rosana Rodriguez, one of 5 socialists elected to the city council that year. In 2022, we elected Congresswoman Delia Ramirez, who has been a really strong voice for ceasefire from day one. And just this past Tuesday, so we were running a really amazing healthcare and mutual aid organizer named Graciela Guzman for state senate. We're up against an establishment candidate who had $2.5 million and just kicked their asses. It was really great.
Hell yeah.
So it's been, I think there is no question that, socialist, unapologetically progressive candidates can win in these districts. I think, the tough question is just always, what do we actually do with these seats? What we've sort of been trying to do is not only push good policies, but once we get people who are movement back candidates into office, really think through with them, how can they also be using their seats and their platforms, to support tenant organizing, to support labor organizing, to support deportation defense. That's also something that, gives me a lot of hope heading into the end of this year. Next year is just having really strong community organizations and some institutional power behind them.
I was fully prepared for you to say the end of the world. That's really wonderful. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. It's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's also so important for people to hear that there are alternatives, that it's not just the lesser of two evils. But most of the time that means you actually, like going out there and creating the alternatives yourselves. But that's like, if it can happen in like a city as big as Chicago, that means it can happen anywhere. So that's awesome. Rebecca, again, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun and it was great getting to see you.
Yeah, it was great to see you too, and great to meet you, Rivka.
Great to meet you. Thank you.
Let's all go to the lobby.
Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And if you want to support the show and get access to our Patreon episodes, the link is in the episode description in your podcast player or at mvcpod.com.
For next week, we'll be watching the 1997 Studio Ghibli masterpiece, Princess Mononoke.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.